who don't know me, my name is Danelle Dixon, and I'm the CEO and Executive Director of the Stellar Development Foundation, also known as SDF. The Stellar Development Foundation is a nonprofit that supports the growth of the ecosystem and of the Stellar Network, which is an open source public blockchain network. I'm really excited to be here today and introduce you to Ginger Baker. She's SDF's newest board member. Today, we're going to learn a little bit about Ginger and her career, her journey, what drew her to SDF's work, and the direction that she sees out there for the industry and where our industry is headed. Hello, Ginger.
Hi, Danelle. Thanks so much for having me. It's fun to be here.
So it's so great to have you. And to kick us off, I was hoping that you could tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm Ginger Baker. I live in Northern California. I grew up in various parts of the U.S., but I do consider myself, a global citizen, hopefully, or working towards that through some of the work I've done. I have 2 kids and a wonderful husband and a brand new dog. So those are probably the great facts of life. I'm also
How's that brand new dog doing?
Oh, sorry. What was that?
I said, how's the brand new dog doing?
He's great. He's still very much a puppy, so less than a year. But he's fun. He's fuzzy. He's like the fuzziest dog. He's almost like a stuffed animal with all the fur. So we're enjoying him very much. So that's a little bit about me. Also, I'm my son's basketball coach, which is a very big deal for me because I'm a huge basketball fan and I've played my entire life. So I'm the coach of the middle school basketball team right now, which is definitely a favorite thing for me each year.
And how about your career?
Yeah, so my career has really centered around that intersection between technology and how it can be applied to economic empowerment. So if you think about that intersection, the topic of financial inclusion has really been the thread that's tied almost all of my experiences and roles together. So I've worked on financial included related products or ecosystems or relationships or whatever it happens to be at both big tech. So I worked at Facebook, traditional financial services company, or more traditional companies like Visa, and then startups like Ripple and Square. And I'm now the head of financial access at Plaid. And I've been really excited about my career. I like taking the approach of looking at the problem space or the opportunity space from a lot of different frames has been fun. I also tend to, sort of dive in deep into a particular market or segment for a particular period of time. And then I will sort of pull back to look at stuff more from a macro standpoint. So I spent a lot of time with Visa in Rwanda when I was working on financial services and Messenger in the Philippines. My role at Plaid is to build the tech and the relationships that help people to have access to completely portable financial data so that you can take the financial data that sits in your bank account or your crypto account or wherever it resides and move that data to another application or service to avail yourselves of the value of that service.
Well, we found Ginger because we thought her background was just fascinating, and we thought it really connected so well with the focus areas for SDF. But honestly, Ginger and I really bonded over this whole middle school basketball thing because both of us say that, and we know how challenging that is. So I just love the fact that you're the coach, and I know how hard that is on so many levels. First of all, to have a son playing on your team, but also just to be the coach of middle school boys. So congratulations.
Also, to be clear, I think if our kids actually played against each other, we might not be in this relationship from a career standpoint, because I don't think we could. It would be too fierce. It would be too competitive, I think.
I'd love to dig a bit deeper into your career journey. So was stepping into leadership roles like the one you have now and the ones you've had before sort of always a part of your plan?
Interesting question. Part of my plan, no. I think, I definitely would say being a leader has generally been something I've stumbled into. I've been a leader for a good chunk of my life. I mean, even as a child, in high school, for example, I was the president of our class. But I wasn't because I intentionally wanted to be that. There was something I was interested in, or a topic I wanted to pursue, or something I was curious about, and I wanted to go and do it. And so that's, I guess it wasn't so much of a strategy around it as good luck, perhaps, like being in the right place at the right time and just caring enough to want to like lead a group of people through something. And I think from a career standpoint, it's been fairly similar, where again, like this intersection of technology and economic development, I am really fascinated with it, and I always have been. And so I have a lot of passion for that topic. And so I will apply that passion and try to bring people along with me to go explore something new or take a look at something. And again, I think being in the right place at the right time has often been a part of getting into leadership roles. So like at the forefront of maybe a new technological advancement, like the proliferation of mobile devices, or some kind of social change, like the adoption of messaging services being such a central part in people's lives through WhatsApp and Messenger. So it's been a lot of luck, but also because I really care about the topics I work on, and I try to get people to come along with me as we explore those opportunities.
I can't imagine that it's always been easy for you to step up into these different roles. Do you have a particular memory of something that was challenging that made you even be better, or that caused you to think about things differently?
Yeah, I think communication has been a big piece of my evolution. And I've remembered times when I felt like I couldn't quite get my point across, and maybe sitting in a room with other leaders, and I think the intersection of sometimes the male-female dynamic has always been a little bit interesting in my career. But there have certainly been moments when I felt like I couldn't quite get my voice to be strong enough. And oftentimes, and my team will attest to this, I love to draw on the whiteboards. And I think that this was actually a tool I developed because I couldn't get people to listen in a way that I thought I was being well understood or given a proper forum. And so I would say something, I didn't feel like people were listening, the people were talking over me, or my point of view wasn't coming across. So I would just stand up and draw it out. That doesn't always work because I'm not great at drawing, nor do I have good handwriting, but sometimes just like documenting the idea would sometimes help to get that through. So communication tactics, and they have to be different in every situation, has been something I've continued to try to pay attention to and evolve based on the situation and the group of people I'm with.
Well, you just mentioned that maybe it was the male-female dynamic, or just the fact that you were a woman in leadership role.
Yeah.
Tell us more about the challenges or the misnomers, or maybe the benefits about being a woman in a leadership position.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this balance you need to strike as a female leader between being assertive and being likable. And that's not always easy. And I think early in my career, I really over-indexed on the likability. Like if people like me, this will go well. And I was a little nervous about being too assertive. I think also because the expectation is that I wouldn't have been assertive. And so it felt like sort of overriding expectations that folks may have had. But I had this great mentor, still do, Sarah Fryer. She was the CFO at Square when I worked there, and she's now the CEO of Nextdoor. And I remember she told me one time, just like really directly, like, it doesn't matter if they like you, like, you just need to make sure they respect you, right? And so what is the combination of how you need to exist that drives respect over likability? And I think for women, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, that likability component is an important part of what we do and how we exist in the world. And we even carry our own biases around that too. But having somebody say that so directly to me, which was like, you're over indexing on likability, like make sure you're indexing on respect, was a really good, like, waking up moment for me.
Oh, I think that is such a great piece of advice, one that I didn't get early enough in my career. And I definitely over-rotated on the likability. I got to be honest, sometimes I still do. Sometimes I see out there the social media responses to things we do or we say, and I'm like, really? So I definitely feel like it's a journey that we all can, probably not just women, that we all can benefit from that kind of advice.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think that there's more that we can learn from the failures that we've had than our successes. I always tell my boys this, that every failure is a chance for you to do something differently next time. So anything that you'd share along those lines and what you've learned in those processes?
Yeah, I mean, I've made a lot of, mistakes, or, failed quite a bit. I failed early in hiring. Like I was not I did not hire great early in my career. And I think, getting the right people on your team is super important. And it's not something that you're going to wake up on the morning one day and be like, I'm going to become a manager and I'm going to be really great at hiring. Like, you really have to work at it. You have to understand like what makes great team members and how do you hire correctly. But not all failures. I mean, if you're watching the evolution of something that you're working on that's sort of starting to go off track, like you can turn that failure into opportunities. Certainly, when I was working for Visa in Rwanda, we went there with a singular intention was to launch Visa's first branchless banking product. So this was a product that existed only on mobile devices and did not have a plastic card associated. And this was back in 2011 when I moved to Kigali. So this was like a very interesting idea at the time, and mobile money was starting to take off in East Africa. But it started with a very singular product proposition. We're going to go and do this product. But as we began to hit different challenges and roadblocks in the evolution of that product, we began to understand actually it was because the environment there and the government that we were working with in Rwanda was needing more from us than just that singular product. And actually what they wanted a more full and robust public-private partnership between Visa and the government of Rwanda. And so the fact that we, noticed that things were not going as we had hoped, but instead of bailing or just bowing out completely, we really tried to dig in deep to understand what could we do differently that would open up doors. And then we modified what we were doing. We still launched that product, which is called mVisa, which was great. But probably the best thing that came out of that experience was just how do you constructively engage with a national government as a Fortune 500 company, especially in a continent where there wasn't as much experience there, from the work that Visa had done in the past. So anyway, I think there's ways that you could take these failures and yes, learn from them in the past, but you can also take the failure in real time and like pivot it to turn it into a more interesting opportunity than perhaps you were even expecting.
Yeah, I love that. I think that, one of the things that I always really like to have are these goals that we set out, either if they're product goals or they're goals for us internally. And the thing about a goal is that you might actually pivot along the way and you might not achieve the exact thing that you set out to. And you need to be willing to make those pivots and to learn for what's going on in the context that you're in. So I do think that it's really hard. You can't identify failures in your life. I certainly have plenty, but I also have a lot of those opportunities where we were able to pivot to make it better and more right and more constant with the situation. So I think it's really awesome to be able to take in that context and to listen. And I think that sometimes we forget to do that along the way. On a similar note, what is one piece of advice that you give someone watching this, no matter what stage of their career that they're in?
Well, I mean, just to build on what we were just talking about, like I would ask a lot of questions, like ask questions constantly test your assumptions, constantly test your hypotheses, like things change. Like you really need to, you just keep asking the next level question. And I think that having that's actually what I hire for, just talk about something we were talking about earlier, that is actually what I learned for people that I work with. Like I want them to be really hungry and super curious. And so I guess you could tie that into advice for folks, like, be great. Like no matter what you're doing, just be great. And I think that that phrase of like blossom while you're planted is really important, especially early in your career. I think the opportunities that I have gained or like have been available to me, and even still today that are available to me, actually come a lot from the people that I interacted with in my early 20s. And I think, I mean, that was a long time ago. Don't need to say how many years, but I showed up hungry and motivated, and I really cared. Like I really cared about our outcomes, even if the role I was in was not actually what I thought I wanted to do, or the thing that I was working on actually didn't actually have that much personal interest in it. Just how you show up can really matter. I think the other thing is like we should have fun. Life is too short, and you should have a good time with what you do. And I think that's really important. It helps with perspective. It helps with motivation. It helps with team camaraderie. When I was at Facebook, we had a great team called Mobile Financial Services at Facebook, one of the best teams I've worked with. And we did some really amazing stuff. We increased financial inclusion in the Philippines. We created this great product that existed in emerging markets where people could link accounts or create financial accounts and use it to send money or pay bills or buy airtime. Like there's a lot of good stuff that came from that product. But I think the best thing that we did was we had fun as a team. Like we had a cowbell that we used on Friday afternoon meetings. We had a cat mascot. Like, I don't know, we had a great time. And when people have fun, like they want to show up, they want to get engaged. They're just naturally more productive. So those would be a couple of thoughts, I think.
That is such great advice. I think the have fun one, it gets lost. One of the things that I decided early on, especially once I had kids, is that since I didn't have the choice about whether to work or not work, I needed to work. I was a single mom at the time and I had 3 boys. And my focus was that I needed to really be in a role and to be doing work that inspired me, that constantly challenged me, and that I liked doing with people that I liked being with. And it was those choices that really caused like all of my decisions about where I was going to work. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the big name. It was about, am I going to like these people? Are they going to inspire me to even be better than I am? And I think that have fun part is something that we can't lose. And I get a little fearful sometimes in today's world that we're not having enough fun because not all of us are together.
Right.
And because of all the things that have happened over the last many years. But I think that is such a crucial thing. So have you been able to do that at all of the roles that you've been in?
So probably not all of them, but I do try, like now, in fact, I'm looking to see if I have one of the props around. We have like a hat thing at Plaid. Oh, I do have one. Well, here's my take credit hat. Like we're constantly wearing hats. And I don't know how we came up with that. It was just this random moment that happened where all of a sudden it made sense for us to put on weird hats in a meeting. And we've been doing it for 2.5 years. And it's easy for us to express ourselves because you can see it visually from a virtual distance and you don't have to be together to have that, joke or funny thing that you do. Like it's something that we could do remotely. But again, like we didn't plan that. It's just, something that you stumble upon when you really want to connect with your team and when you're having fun. Like you have to be in an environment where you feel comfortable randomly putting a hat on your head and making a joke about it and feeling like people are going to accept you. You're being authentic, that that's just a natural part of existing as a team together is that ability to play.
I wanted to point out that if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the comments and I'm going to try to look at those as I'm asking questions as I go through here. So I know you started your career focused on financial services and emerging markets, and you told us a little bit about that. Mm-hmm. In particular, you're a big advocate for the impact that expanding financial access for women in these markets can have. Why is that? Why has that been a focal point for you?
Yeah. Obviously or maybe not obviously, there's research that shows, that when women are in control of limited budgets, that they will traditionally or typically invest more in education and health and things that are going to help their children to prosper. And I think you can tie that to not just building strong children and strong families, but then building strong communities. And so I think that there's like a, research proven tie between those two things. But mostly it was just personal experiences that I had in trying to, build some of these tools and products and markets around the world that just really sat with me. I mean, we were doing research in Bangladesh. This is when I was with Facebook. And we were trying to understand motivations that someone might have to use a digital financial management tool. And in order to understand what you would potentially build to aid someone in those desires, you really have to understand why they do it or what it is about their lives that could be improved. And there was just one woman talking about, her ability to manage the money for the family based on the very wide swings of income that came from her husband's job was like, that was her identity, like her ability to be creative about how that money was managed, to be able to make it last in seasons where income was low and be able to save it and hold it back when it was high. And to do that, like with a very intricate web of very informal systems, everything from storing it in a container in the kitchen to giving some to her sister, to hiding it in places, to stitching it into clothes, to buying jewelry because that would last longer and hold value. I mean, it was just amazing what this woman was holding in her head in terms of all of the things that she was doing to have the best financial outcome for her family. And so not just that experience, but mobile money agents that we worked with in the Philippines, more than 50% of the agent network we were working with were women-owned businesses, and they were just all business. Like I was so impressed with them, right? And so like finding ways that you can empower women in these roles, not only as the leader of a family, but also a leader of a small business, and having more opportunities, to be part of these networks that we're investing in, on-ramps and off-ramps for fiat currency to digital currency. Like, these are places that are on the forefront of technical innovation, and having women be a part of that, I think will not only be good for them, for the products that we're all building, but also for the communities in which they live.
It's one of those things that the research that has been done, I think, by the World Bank, it's talked about the fact that when women are engaged in financial infrastructure and are able to use those tools, the GDP of the government goes up and or the country goes up. And it's one of the things that one of the reasons why I am so deeply focused on it. When I was at Mozilla, we were building a Firefox operating system for a mobile device. It was for low end mobile devices that could be used anywhere, and it was built on the HTML5. So we were like very interested in the open part. But one of the things I loved in partnership with these different carriers was the fact that we could look at local problems. And one of the problems was that women were trying to make money. And one of the things they could do is they could sell one of the extra meals that they had that night, and how that would just improve things for them. And so giving them the tools to do that just changes the whole dynamic for the family. So I too, like, I'm just so enamored with that and so really truly want to help there. And I'm so grateful for the work that you've done. And certainly one of the things that we've talked about is those on and off ramps, and the work that you've done historically in Africa and all over really helps us to be able to have the sounding board from you to talk through these really important issues and to hopefully get them right, solving these local problems.
Yeah, and if you think about, I made the flip comment about, moving cash to digital, digital fiat to crypto. Like, there's a whole host of chains that have to be solved for. And you asked a question earlier about failures. I don't know if I want to put it in the failure count, but I think a very large learning from some of my experiences is that how do you properly incentivize, motivate those retail outlets or those endpoints, many of which are humans, running small retail shops, some of which are also digital, but like, how do you get the on-ramps and off-ramps solved? If you really want to move out of cash-based economies and into a digital world, like, that's, to me, that was the hardest part. It's been the hardest part in three different companies and three different products I've worked on. Like, that piece is the hardest. And yeah, a lot of those endpoints are women. And so I just think it's a really interesting problem that we're going to have to continue to keep solving.
So there's a question here that may be a little bit too specific, but I'm going to go ahead and grab it. Soroban, if you remember, is our smart contracting platform that we're building. And I'm going to ask you about one of the questions is, what is the biggest underserved area in fintech that you feel Stellar and Soroban, or just Stellar, could really help fill over the next 36 to 48 months?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And it's not a cop-out answer, but I really, really mean this, which is, what is the place, the segment, the people that you're trying to serve, and what is it that they need in order to do the thing that they want to do, take the action they want to take, have a better life, have a better livelihood? You really have to hone that down to something very specific and small to get started. So thinking about, like, these broad industry problems, I've always struggled being successful if I take too broad of a mindset or too broad of a view on things. And where I felt more confidence that we were building the right things or investing in the right kind of technology was when you could get very pointed about, this is ultimately the problem we want to solve in a global basis, but we're going to start very locally. And so who's the segment that you're trying to solve? Is it artists? Is it low-income women? Is it online businesses and e-commerce? Like, what's the thing that you're trying to solve? Who are your customers? And then work your way into the technology that needs to be built from that real world problem. And making money work better for people and making it more fluid is what Stellar is all about. And I think that can apply to so many different situations. I love the model that Danelle and team have of, like, identifying and finding, businesses and entrepreneurs who are building in this ecosystem based on real world problems. And I suspect that what gets built and what those problems are is going to be fairly diverse, right? And so the trick is then to pull up and find the similarities and the patterns across those things.
Well, here to that. There's so much noise out there, though, and there's a focus on the hype of crypto and blockchain, like the trading use cases, the speculation. So much of our attention over the last month has been on the awful failure of FTX and how that harmed so many people. So we often try to instead get to people to see the value it brings to the financial system here. Do you want to see our industry focus somewhere else or there, or how do you think about it?
Meaning, like, on people versus not?
Yeah. Or, we're trying to focus on these real world problems, as you just mentioned, and we're really trying to focus there, but is there something else, another way to attack that?
Okay, so I think you have to base it there. But you can also think about the systems that are required to eliminate the pain points that, again, once you pull up and you look across those patterns, like where do the pain points exist that are similar across different types of services? I'm going to cheat and just use Plaid for a second, which is like, Plaid quickly realized that individuals, again, wanted to tie their financial data or move their financial data from one particular place to another. But they didn't learn that by talking to people. Like, they had customers and businesses that were trying to build great products and services for people, and they realized many of them had the same need. And so it doesn't have to be the person that you start with. It can be an ecosystem pain point. It can be a group of businesses. It can be a group of customers who are telling you over and over again that they have something that they want to solve. This happened again, cheating a little bit here with Plaid, which was like, we were hearing that people wanted to be able to see their crypto holdings alongside holdings that they have in other types of investment accounts, savings accounts, checking accounts, and even loans. And so that was a pretty specific pattern we were seeing across a number of different customers who were focused on building wealth management solutions. And so what did we do? Well, let's go build integrations into digital asset exchanges and other crypto companies so people can see the balances of those accounts. But we didn't, there wasn't a lot of talking to the individual person about that. It was about seeing the system and the pattern of the request across a number of different customers that were valuable to us.
Yeah, using data to sort of help to drive the solution as well. Another question from the audience is, what is your perspective of the most attractive use cases that can be achieved working with MoneyGram in the MoneyGram integration?
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting one. I mean, I think there's like two areas with an organization like MoneyGram that are probably interested in looking at. One plays right into what we were talking about earlier about the agent network. I mean, they have such a strong, visible, and reputable money movement network that local communities understand and see. And I think you cannot dismiss the value of that. That is a very hard thing for a company to build. MoneyGram's been doing this for decades, right? Yeah. But if you take new tech companies and you think about their relevance to physical cash locations and local communities globally, that is a very hard thread, to tie, because one, that company may not be known. Certainly their offerings and financial services aren't going to be known. So the amount of marketing dollars and communication that have to go into building brands in local communities is really challenging. And MoneyGram has that in spades. And so I think like the combination between Stellar's technology and the ability to more easily move funds around the world, in addition to MoneyGram's brand and prominence in local communities, is a fantastic offering.
Yeah, Alex, the chairman and CEO of MoneyGram, says they've been getting disrupted for like the last 50 years or something like that. It's this joke that he makes across the board. And the great thing is that this isn't about disruption as much as it about really enhancing that traditional financial infrastructure and leveraging the value that they've built over all of these years and really bringing that to blockchain so that you don't need a credit card and you don't need a bank account, which a lot of people don't have outside the US and outside of Western countries. So it's definitely something it's one of the things I'm most proud that we were able to bring together. All right, I have one last question for you because I think we only have time for it. So if you had a billboard in Times Square and it could say anything, what would it say? Throw a ball there, Ginger, come on.
Okay, all right, let me think. I mean, something probably super cheesy, like, be authentic or something. So when I was a kid, this is going to date me. Okay, so maybe we delete this part of the segment. When I was a kid, there was this America Top 40. There was a guy named Casey Kasem who used to say, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. Like, I think it would be something like that. America Top 40. I think that's how it went. Yeah. And that just really sticks in the brain. And I think that it's also a great statement, right? You have to have your feet on, you have to be realistic. You have to be grounded. You have to be grounded in what's going on, grounded in your capabilities of your team, grounded in the capabilities of the technology you have, grounded in the realities of the world and the ecosystem in which you're working, the partner dynamics, but you can't stop, you can't stop trying to go to the moon. So anyway, something I would just 100% borrow Casey Kasem's statement.
Well, I loved that. That actually came on Sundays, and it was one of the things that I was you guys don't understand out there who are not having had to experience this part. We didn't know what was the top 40 unless we sat there on Sundays and listened to Casey Kasem.
And you would tape it. Did you ever do that thing where you would wait for and then you would press the 2 buttons on your tape player so you could record it and listen to it later? That was a big deal.
It was a really big deal. None of you guys understand how cool it was way back when.
Yeah, and now we're talking about Stellar, right? Things have changed.
Things have definitely changed. I am so grateful for the time. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so grateful that you are a part of our Stellar family, and I look forward to all the more we can do together. Thank you, Ginger.
Thanks so much for having me, Danelle. Great to see you.